"Be my date to the gala," poor Janitor asked, unaware she was Emperor's daughter. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. The maintenance corridor of Orbital Station Zenith 7 smelled like disinfectant and recycled air, a scent Ethan Cole had grown intimately familiar with over the past 3 years. He pushed his cleaning cart down the dimmed hallway, the wheels squeaking softly against the polished floor, while outside the reinforced windows, the stars turned slowly in the eternal night of space. For a human janitor working on one of the galaxy's most prestigious diplomatic stations, it was just another shift in a life of quiet routine, far removed from the glittering conferences and high-stakes negotiations happening just a few levels above his head. Ethan had never planned to end up here. 5 years ago, he had been a promising engineering student on Earth, full of dreams about designing the next generation of faster-than-light engines. Then his father had gotten sick, the medical bills had piled up faster than he could count, and suddenly college became a luxury he could no longer afford. He had taken the first job he could find that offered decent pay and asked no questions, a custodial position on a frontier station. When his father passed anyway, 6 months into his contract, Ethan found himself too numb and too broke to do anything but keep working. The station managers appreciated his reliability, his technical knowledge that let him fix minor issues without calling maintenance, and his ability to become invisible when important people walked by. 3 years later, he was still here, mopping floors and emptying trash while the galaxy's elite barely noticed he existed. The station itself was a marvel of engineering, a massive ring-shaped structure that housed the Galactic Council's primary diplomatic facility. Representatives from over 200 species maintained permanent offices here, negotiating treaties, resolving disputes, and conducting the complex business of keeping thousands of worlds from descending into chaos. The outer ring held the residential quarters and support facilities where people like Ethan lived and worked. The middle sections contained the conference halls, embassies, and administrative offices. And at the very heart of the station, accessible only to the highest-ranking officials, sat the Grand Rotunda, a cathedral-like space where the most important gatherings in the known galaxy took place. Ethan had seen the Rotunda exactly once, during his orientation tour 3 years ago. He remembered the soaring ceilings, the holographic displays showing real-time feeds from thousands of worlds, and the sense of standing at the very center of civilization itself. It had been beautiful and intimidating in equal measure, a reminder of how small he was in the grand scheme of things. Since then, he had kept to his assigned corridors, doing his job and trying not to think too much about the life he might have had. He was nearly finished with the evening shift when he heard voices coming from one of the small observation lounges ahead. The rooms were supposed to be empty at this hour, most of the diplomatic staff long gone to their quarters or to one of the station's upscale restaurants and bars. Ethan hesitated, then decided to check it out. Probably just a couple of junior staffers who had lost track of time. What he found instead was a young woman standing alone at the panoramic window, her silhouette framed against the spectacular view of the Veil Nebula. She wore simple clothes, dark pants, and a fitted jacket, her brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. As Ethan's cart squeaked to a halt in the doorway, she turned, and he found himself looking into the most striking eyes he had ever seen. They were an unusual shade of violet, almost luminous in the dim light, and they regarded him with a mixture of surprise and something that might have been relief. She said, "I'm sorry, I know this area is probably closed. I can leave if you need to clean." Ethan shook his head quickly. No, you're fine. I can come back later. I didn't mean to disturb you." "You're not disturbing me," she said, and there was something in her voice, a warmth that seemed genuine, that made him pause. "To be honest, I'm glad to see someone who isn't trying to bow or scrape or offer me something. Do you have a moment?" It was an odd request, and Ethan should have politely declined and moved on. But there was something about her, a quality he couldn't quite name, that made him want to stay. "Sure," he said, parking his cart by the door. "Rough day?" She laughed, and it was a sound without artifice, pure and unguarded. "You could say that. I've spent the last 8 hours in meetings where everyone spoke in careful diplomatic language and nobody said what they actually meant. Sometimes I forget what it's like to have a normal conversation." Ethan walked over to the window, keeping a respectful distance. I know the feeling. Well, sort of. My conversations usually involve deciding which cleaning solution works best on the Cien slime trails. That earned him another laugh. I'm Maya, by the way. Ethan, he said, and they shook hands. Her grip was firm and confident. So what brings you to the station? Diplomatic Corps? Something like that, Maya said, turning back to the window. My family has certain expectations. Obligations. Sometimes I feel like I'm just playing a role someone else wrote for me. There was a weight in her words that Ethan recognized, the burden of disappointing people you cared about. I get that. My dad wanted me to be an engineer, make something of myself. Instead, I'm pushing a mop for minimum wage. Not exactly the dream. But you're here, Maya said, gesturing at the stars beyond the window. In space, on a station that hosts representatives from across the galaxy. That's not nothing. I suppose, Ethan admitted. Most days it doesn't feel like much. But yeah, when I look out there, I remember why I wanted to leave Earth in the first place. There's so much out there. So many possibilities. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the nebula's colors shift and swirl. Ethan found himself relaxing in a way he rarely did around strangers. There was something about Maya that made her easy to talk to, as if she genuinely cared what he had to say. Can I ask you something? Maya said suddenly. Do you ever feel like people only see what they expect to see? Like you could be anyone, but they've already decided who you are based on how you look or where you work. All the time, Ethan said. To most people on this station, I'm basically furniture. They look right through me. Maya nodded slowly. I have the opposite problem. People see me and immediately project all their expectations and assumptions. Sometimes I wish I could just be anonymous, you know? Just be myself without all the baggage. Sounds like we both got a raw deal, Ethan said with a wry smile. You want to trade? I'll take your important family obligations. You can have my thrilling career in sanitation. That made her smile. If only it were that simple. They talked for another 20 minutes, the conversation flowing easily from topic to topic. Maya asked about his work and seemed genuinely interested when he described the station's maintenance systems and the various technical challenges he dealt with daily. He asked about her life, and she spoke carefully but honestly about feeling trapped by duty and obligation, about wanting to make her own choices but feeling the weight of expectations she couldn't ignore. Eventually, Ethan glanced at his datapad and realized how late it had gotten. I should let you go, and I need to finish my rounds before my supervisor starts wondering where I am. Right, Maya said, and there was something like disappointment in her voice. It was nice talking to you, Ethan. Really nice. You too, he said. If you're ever hanging around the maintenance levels and need someone to complain about bureaucracy with, I'm usually around. I might take you up on that, she said. Over the next few weeks, those chance encounters became a regular occurrence. Ethan would find Maya in various quiet corners of the station, always in the same simple clothes, always alone. They would talk about everything and nothing, their conversations ranging from philosophy to their favorite foods to the absurdities of station life. Ethan learned that Maya loved old Earth music, especially the classical composers, and that she had a wicked sense of humor once you got past her initial reserve. She learned that he had a gift for fixing things, that he secretly wrote poetry he never showed anyone, and that he dreamed of one day having enough money saved to go back to school. What Ethan didn't know was that Maya spent her days in the highest levels of the diplomatic corps, attending meetings that shaped the fate of entire civilizations. He didn't know that when she left him each evening, she returned to a suite of rooms that occupied an entire section of the station's exclusive residential quarter. And he certainly didn't know that her full name was Maya Celestine Aldred, only child of Emperor Marcus Aldred, ruler of the Terran Empire and one of the most powerful humans in the galaxy. The Terran Empire had risen in the century since humanity had developed faster than light travel. Starting from Earth and its early colonies, humans had expanded rapidly, their adaptability and determination earning them both respect and wariness from the older galactic civilizations. Where other species had specialized roles and rigid social structures, humans proved capable of filling any niche, mastering any skill. They could be warriors or diplomats, scientists or artists, often excelling at multiple disciplines simultaneously. This versatility had allowed them to claim a disproportionate amount of influence in galactic affairs. Emperor Marcus Aldred had taken power 20 years ago, consolidating humanity's scattered colonies and interests under a single banner. His rule was generally considered benevolent, focused on prosperity and peaceful expansion rather than conquest. But he was also a pragmatist who understood power and wasn't afraid to use it when necessary. The Empire maintained the largest fleet in the known galaxy, its ships crewed by some of the finest officers and equipped with technology that made other species nervous. Under Marcus's leadership, humanity had become a force that could not be ignored or dismissed. Maya had grown up in the shadow of that power, raised in the imperial palace on Nova Terra, the Empire's capital world. She had been educated by the finest tutors, trained in diplomacy, strategy, languages, and all the skills expected of someone who might one day inherit the throne. Her life had been a carefully orchestrated series of appearances, ceremonies, and diplomatic functions, each one designed to reinforce her position and prepare her for her eventual role. She had learned early that everyone who approached her wanted something, that every friendship was calculated, every gesture carefully measured for political advantage. Coming to Zenith 7 had been her first real taste of something approaching independence. Her father had sent her to represent the Empire at an upcoming series of negotiations, a test of her diplomatic skills and a chance to prove herself capable of handling significant responsibility. She had arrived with a full retinue of guards, advisors, and staff, all of whom treated her with the deference due her position. Within days, she had felt suffocated by their constant attention and the weight of everyone's expectations. Meeting Ethan had been an accident. She had slipped away from her handlers one evening, changed into the plainest clothes she owned, and wandered the station's less prestigious corridors just to feel like a normal person for a few hours. Finding him in that observation lounge, being treated like just another person rather than an imperial princess, had been a revelation. For the first time in longer than she could remember, someone had talked to her without an agenda, without trying to gain favor or influence. He had simply been kind and genuine and real. She knew she should tell him the truth. Every day she spent with him, the deception felt worse. But she was terrified that the moment he knew who she really was, everything would change. He would start treating her the way everyone else did, with careful respect and calculated words. She would lose the one genuine connection she had made in years. So she kept silent, telling herself it was just for a little while longer, just until she figured out how to tell him in a way that wouldn't ruin everything. The catalyst came in the form of the Grand Unification Gala, an event that occurred once every 5 years when the Galactic Council hosted a massive celebration to commemorate the founding of the current interspecies alliance. It was the social event of the decade, attended by heads of state, high-ranking diplomats, and the most influential figures from across the galaxy. Invitations were coveted and carefully controlled, and security was so tight that even mentioning the event in certain contexts could get you detained for questioning. Maya's attendance was not optional. As the Emperor's daughter and official representative, she was expected to be there, dressed in formal imperial regalia, making appropriate small talk with various dignitaries and power brokers. She had attended similar events before and found them exhausting. Hours of maintaining a perfect facade while navigating the treacherous waters of galactic politics. She was walking through one of the station's mid-level corridors, returning from yet another preparatory meeting for the gala, when she ran into Ethan. Literally ran into him. Distracted by her thoughts, she rounded a corner and collided with his cleaning cart, sending bottles of cleaning solution clattering across the floor. "Oh no, I'm so sorry," Maya said, immediately dropping to help gather the scattered bottles. "No worries," Ethan said with a laugh, kneeling beside her. "I wasn't paying attention either." "Hey, you okay? You look stressed." "Just thinking about an upcoming event," Maya said, setting bottles back in the cart. "Something I really don't want to attend." "One of those diplomatic things you mentioned?" "Exactly. Hours of forced politeness and pretending to care about things that bore me to tears." Ethan sat back on his heels, studying her face. "You know what you need? A night off. Something fun to look forward to." Maya smiled sadly. "I wish. But this is the kind of thing I can't get out of." "Well," Ethan said, and there was a note of determination in his voice that Maya hadn't heard before. What if we made our own event? Something actually enjoyable? What do you mean? There's this thing happening next week, Ethan said. Nothing as fancy as your diplomatic gala, I'm sure, but the station's service workers union puts on a small celebration a couple times a year. Dancing, food, just people relaxing and having a good time. It's not glamorous, but it's genuine. Would you want to go with me? Maya's first instinct was to say no, to explain that she couldn't possibly attend something like that. But then she looked at Ethan's hopeful expression, at the sincerity in his eyes, and found herself wanting desperately to say yes. The service workers' celebration would happen 3 days before the grand gala. She calculated quickly. She could make it work. Her security team wouldn't be happy, but she could slip away for a few hours. I would love that, she said, and meant it completely. Ethan's face lit up with a genuine smile. Really? Great. I have to warn you, it's nothing fancy. Most people just wear whatever nice clothes they have. But there's usually a decent band, and the food committee actually does a pretty good job. It sounds perfect, Maya said. For the next several days, Maya found herself looking forward to the event with an anticipation she hadn't felt in years. Her official duties continued, endless meetings and negotiations that demanded her full attention. But in the quiet moments, her thoughts kept drifting to the upcoming evening. She enlisted the help of one of her younger attendants, a woman named Claire who had proven herself both loyal and discreet, to help her acquire an appropriate outfit. Nothing too fancy, she had specified. Just something nice that won't make me stand out. Claire had given her a knowing look, but asked no questions, returning the next day with a simple but elegant dress in deep blue, the kind of thing a young professional might wear to a semi-formal event. Maya tried it on in the privacy of her quarters and barely recognized herself. Without the imperial regalia and formal styling, she looked like any other young woman preparing for a date. Meanwhile, Ethan was experiencing his own crisis of confidence. He had invited Maya on impulse, not really thinking through the implications, and now he was second-guessing everything. What if she was just being polite when she said yes? What if she expected something more sophisticated than a gathering of janitors and technicians in one of the station's recreational halls? He confided his worries to his roommate, a maintenance tech named Louise who had worked on the station even longer than Ethan. You're overthinking this, Louise said, sprawled on the worn couch in their small shared quarters. She said yes because she wants to go. Just be yourself and have a good time. Easy for you to say, Ethan muttered. You're not the one who's been talking to someone for weeks and just realized he might have actual feelings for her. Louise sat up, suddenly interested. Oh, so this is serious? I thought you were just being friendly. I thought so too, Ethan admitted. But the more time I spend with her, the more I realize she's not like anyone I've ever met. She's smart and funny, and she actually listens when I talk. And she sees me, you know? Not just a janitor, but me. Then definitely don't screw this up, Louise said helpfully. The night of the service workers' celebration arrived with surprising speed. Maya arranged for Claire to create a distraction that would keep her security detail occupied, then slipped out of her quarters wearing the blue dress and minimal makeup. She felt like a teenager sneaking out, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The corridors of the station's residential sections were mostly empty at this hour, and she made her way to the designated meeting spot without incident. Ethan was already there, waiting near the entrance to Recreation Hall 5, and Maya's breath caught when she saw him. He had traded his usual maintenance coveralls for dark slacks and a button-down shirt, his hair neatly combed, and there was a kind of earnest nervousness in his expression that she found endearing. Wow, Ethan said when he saw her. You look amazing. So do you, Maya said, and felt herself blushing like she hadn't since she was a teenager. They walked into the hall together, and Maya was immediately struck by how different the atmosphere was from the diplomatic functions she was used to. The space had been decorated with simple but cheerful streamers and lights, giving it a warm, welcoming feel. Several dozen people were already there, clustered in small groups or sitting at tables laden with homemade food. Near one wall, a small band was setting up their instruments, the musicians chatting and laughing as they prepared for the evening. This is nice, Maya said, meaning it sincerely. Wait until you try the food, Ethan said. Mrs. Chun from the laundry services makes these dumplings that are absolutely incredible. He introduced her to people as they moved through the hall, and Maya found herself relaxing in a way she rarely did at official events. Nobody here knew who she was or cared about her connections. They were friendly and welcoming simply because she was with Ethan, and several people mentioned how nice it was to finally meet the girl he'd been talking about. Maya filed that detail away to tease him about later. The evening unfolded with an easy, comfortable rhythm. They ate food from a dozen different cultural traditions, Earth cuisine mixing with dishes from various colony worlds, and even a few alien recipes that adventurous human cooks had adapted. Maya tried everything Ethan recommended and discovered that Mrs. Chin's dumplings lived up to the hype. They talked with other guests, and Maya found herself genuinely enjoying the conversations, the lack of political subtext making everything feel refreshingly straightforward. When the band started playing, Ethan hesitated, then offered his hand. "I should warn you, I'm not a great dancer." "Neither am I," Maya lied. She had been trained in formal ballroom dancing since childhood, but she had no intention of revealing that particular skill. She took his hand and let him lead her onto the floor. The band played a mix of old Earth standards and more recent popular songs, their style loose and energetic. Ethan was, as advertised, not a particularly skilled dancer, but he made up for it with enthusiasm and an ability to laugh at himself when he stepped on her feet. Maya found herself laughing too, genuinely happy in a way that felt almost foreign. As the evening wore on and the music shifted to slower songs, Ethan pulled her closer, and they swayed together in comfortable silence. Maya rested her head against his shoulder and allowed herself to imagine, just for a moment, that this could be her real life. That she could be just Maya, not Princess Maya, not the Emperor's daughter with all the weight and responsibility that entailed. Just a young woman dancing with someone who made her feel seen and valued for herself. "I'm really glad you said yes to this," Ethan said quietly. "Me too," Maya murmured. "I know we haven't known each other that long," Ethan continued, "but I want you to know that these past few weeks have meant a lot to me. You've made being on this station feel less lonely." Maya lifted her head to look at him, and the sincerity in his eyes made her heart ache. "I feel the same way," she said. "You've given me something I didn't even know I was missing." They stayed until late into the evening, long after many of the other guests had left. Finally, reluctantly, Maya said she needed to go, offering a vague excuse about early meetings. Ethan walked her back toward the residential sections, and they paused at a junction point where their paths would diverge. "Thank you for tonight," Maya said. "It was perfect." "We should do it again," Ethan said. "Maybe next time I'll take you to the observation deck on the outer ring. The view is even better than the one from that lounge where we met." "I'd like that," Maya said, and then, acting on impulse, she stood on her toes and kissed him gently. It was brief and sweet, and when she pulled back, Ethan was staring at her with wonder. "Good night, Ethan," she said softly, then turned and hurried away before she could second-guess herself. Behind her, Ethan stood frozen for a long moment, his fingers touching his lips, a smile slowly spreading across his face. The next 2 days passed in a blur for both of them. Maya returned to her duties with renewed energy, though her mind kept drifting to thoughts of Ethan and the evening they had shared. She found herself smiling at odd moments during meetings, earning curious looks from her advisors. She managed to send Ethan a few brief messages through the station's communication system, carefully worded to avoid revealing too much, and his responses never failed to brighten her day. Ethan, for his part, walked through his work shifts in a kind of daze. Louise teased him mercilessly about his constant distraction, but Ethan didn't care. He was already planning their next outing, mentally cataloging all the interesting but overlooked spots on the station he could show Maya. He had never felt this way about anyone before. This combination of excitement and contentment and the terrifying vulnerability of caring deeply about another person's opinion of him. Then came the day of the Grand Unification Gala, and everything changed. The gala preparations had been underway for months, but in the final 24 hours, the station transformed completely. The Grand Rotunda, already impressive, became something out of a dream. Holographic displays showed scenes from thousands of worlds, cycling through vistas of alien beauty. The lighting shifted through subtle colors, creating an atmosphere that felt both intimate and cosmic. Security personnel, both human and alien, took up positions throughout the station, their presence a reminder of the importance of the gathering. Ethan's supervisor had assigned him to help with the pre-event cleaning, which meant he got to see some of the preparations up close. He worked alongside a crew of other maintenance staff, polishing floors and ensuring everything was perfect for the arriving dignitaries. It was interesting work, a change from his usual routine, but it also meant longer hours. He sent Maya a message apologizing that he wouldn't be able to meet up as they had planned, explaining about the extra work. Her response was brief but understanding. "No problem. Duty calls for both of us, it seems. Talk soon." As the day progressed and the first guests began arriving, Ethan and the other service workers were directed to clear out of the main areas. They retreated to the service corridors and break rooms, their work done until the after-event cleanup. Ethan found himself with several hours of unexpected free time and decided to watch some of the Gala proceedings on the station's internal feed. The broadcast showed the Grand Rotunda filling with an impressive array of beings. Ethan recognized several species from his time on the station: the tall, crystalline Vorians, the floating gas beings called Aerials, the militaristic Mandorians in their ceremonial armor. But there were others he had never seen before, representatives from distant regions of the galaxy who made the journey only for events like this. The human contingent was particularly impressive: officers in crisp military uniforms, diplomats in formal attire, and various other officials representing the Terran Empire's interests. The camera focused on several high-ranking individuals as they entered, and the commentators provided background on each one. "And now," the commentator said, her voice taking on a note of special significance, "we have the arrival of Emperor Marcus Aldred himself, ruler of the Terran Empire, accompanied by his daughter, Princess Maya Celestine Aldred." Ethan's attention had been drifting, but those words snapped him back to the screen with sudden focus. The camera showed the entrance to the rotunda, where a man in an impressive military uniform was walking in, and beside him was a young woman in an elaborate gown. Ethan's mind went blank. The woman on the screen was Maya. His Maya, the girl he had been talking with for weeks, the one who had danced with him just 2 nights ago. But she didn't look like the Maya he knew. Her hair was styled in an intricate updo. She wore jewelry that probably cost more than Ethan would make in his lifetime, and she carried herself with a regal bearing that seemed completely at odds with the casual, warm person he had gotten to know. The commentator continued speaking, providing details about the princess's role in recent negotiations, her reputation as a skilled diplomat despite her young age, and speculation about her future as heir to the empire. Ethan heard none of it. He stared at the screen, feeling like the floor had dropped out from under him. She had lied to him. For weeks, she had led him believe she was just another diplomatic staffer, someone roughly his equal in the grand hierarchy of the station. The whole time, she had been playing some kind of game, amusing herself by slumming with the help. Every conversation they had shared, every moment he had thought was genuine, suddenly felt tainted by the knowledge that she had been deceiving him. "Hey, you okay?" Luis appeared beside him, following his gaze to the screen. "Wow, the princess is even prettier in person than in photos. They say she's brilliant too, speaks like 8 languages or something." Ethan couldn't find words. He felt sick, a combination of betrayal and embarrassment churning in his stomach. He had kissed her. He had told her things about himself he had never told anyone. And the entire time, she had been lying about who she was. "Ethan," Louise said, more concerned now. "Seriously, what's wrong? You look like you're going to pass out." "I need some air," Ethan managed, standing abruptly. The break room suddenly felt too small, too confined. He pushed past Luis and headed for the nearest observation deck, needing space and quiet to process what he had just learned. The observation deck was mercifully empty, and Ethan stood at the window, staring out at the stars without really seeing them. His mind was racing, replaying every interaction with Maya through this new lens. Had she been laughing at him the whole time? Was this some kind of experiment, seeing how the common people lived? Or had she simply been bored and looking for entertainment before returning to her real life among the powerful and influential? He thought about the service workers' celebration, how natural and happy she had seemed. Had that been an act too? Was she secretly horrified by the simple food and modest venue, just playing along to maintain her disguise? The thoughts spiraled darker and darker, his imagination supplying increasingly painful interpretations of events. What cut deepest was the loss of something he hadn't fully recognized until it was gone. For the first time in years, he had felt like he mattered to someone. Maya had made him feel seen, valued, like he was more than just another invisible worker. Learning that had been based on a lie felt like having something precious ripped away. Time passed, though Ethan couldn't have said how much. Eventually, his datapad chimed with a message. He almost ignored it, but years of ingrained responsibility made him check. It was from his supervisor, asking him to report to one of the service staging areas near the rotunda. Apparently, they needed extra hands for something. Ethan considered refusing, claiming illness, anything to avoid going anywhere near the Gala. But that would raise questions he didn't want to answer, and besides, he needed the job. With mechanical movements, he straightened his uniform and headed for the designated area. The service staging zone was buzzing with activity, staff moving in carefully orchestrated patterns to support the event without being obtrusive. Ethan's supervisor, a stern woman named Henderson, spotted him immediately and waved him over. "Cole, good," Henderson said. "We need you to do a walkthrough of the secondary corridors around the rotunda. Some of the environmental controls are acting up, and we need someone with technical knowledge to check them before they become a problem. Here's a bypass pass for the security checkpoints." She handed him a special access badge, and Ethan clipped it to his uniform. The assignment was actually perfect, giving him something to focus on besides his churning emotions. He grabbed his toolkit and headed into the maze of corridors that surrounded the grand rotunda like a shell. The environmental issue turned out to be minor, a miscalibrated sensor that Ethan fixed in less than 10 minutes. He took his time checking the other systems anyway, grateful for the distraction. These corridors were normally restricted, but they offered indirect views into the rotunda through various monitoring screens and observation panels. Despite himself, Ethan found his gaze drawn to the screens, catching glimpses of the ongoing celebration. The gala was in full swing, a carefully choreographed dance of politics and power. Ethan watched dignitaries mingle, alliances forming and dissolving in the space of conversations. The camera feeds occasionally showed Maya, always surrounded by important-looking people, always wearing that same regal expression. She looked like she belonged there, in that world of influence and consequence. The distance between them had never seemed greater. He was preparing to leave when a commotion erupted in the corridor ahead. Security personnel rushed past, speaking urgently into their communicators. Ethan pressed himself against the wall to let them pass, catching fragments of their conversation. "Possible threat in Section 4, one guard was saying. Unknown individual, refused to stop for screening. Lock down the access points," another responded. "Nobody gets near the rotunda until we verify." More guards appeared, and Ethan realized with growing alarm that they were systematically sealing off the corridors. He was about to identify himself and ask what was happening when the lights suddenly went out, plunging the corridor into darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. Then the alarm started. The sound was deafening, a wailing siren that echoed off the metal walls. Through the chaos, Ethan heard shouting, the sound of running feet, and something that might have been weapons fire. His training, minimal as it was, kicked in. In an emergency, service personnel were supposed to either evacuate or find a safe position and await instructions. But the corridor seals meant evacuation wasn't an option. He spotted a maintenance alcove and ducked inside, pulling out his datapad to check the station's emergency network. What he saw made his blood run cold. Multiple alerts were flashing across the screen, reporting intruders in several sections, security breaches, and something about a credible threat to high-value targets. The Gala was under attack. Ethan's mind raced. He was trapped in a restricted corridor with no clear exit and no idea what was happening. His first instinct was pure self-preservation, find somewhere to hide and wait for security to handle whatever this was. But then he thought about Maya, surrounded by dignitaries in the rotunda, and despite everything, despite his anger and hurt, he felt a surge of fear for her safety. He pulled up the corridor maps on his datapad, looking for any route that might get him closer to the rotunda. If there was a real threat, security would be focused on protecting the important guests, which meant Maya would be guarded. But what if the attackers had planned for that? What if they had a way past the security? The thought spurred him into action. Using his technical knowledge of the station's layout, knowledge he had accumulated through 3 years of maintenance work, Ethan began navigating through the service corridors. He avoided the main passages where security would be concentrated, instead using the narrow maintenance crawlways and utility tunnels that most people didn't even know existed. He could hear fighting in the distance, the distinctive sound of energy weapons and the shouts of combat. Whoever the attackers were, they were well armed and clearly had a plan. Ethan pushed aside his fear and kept moving, driven by an instinct he didn't fully understand. Meanwhile, in the Grand Rotunda, controlled chaos reigned. The moment the alarms had sounded, security had moved with practiced efficiency, forming a protective cordon around the Emperor and other high-value targets. Maya found herself suddenly surrounded by guards, being hustled toward one of the secure evacuation routes. "Your Highness, we need to get you to the safe room," her head of security, a stern woman named Commander Reeves, said urgently. "What about everyone else?" Maya demanded, looking back at the crowd of confused and frightened guests. "They'll be evacuated through secondary routes. Your safety is the priority." Maya wanted to argue, but she knew it would be pointless. She allowed herself to be guided toward the exit, her mind racing. This couldn't be a coincidence, coming at the gala, at the one time when so many important figures were gathered in one place. This was a coordinated attack. They were halfway to the secure room when the first explosion rocked the station. The blast wasn't close, but it was powerful enough to send tremors through the structure and make the lights flicker. Maya stumbled, caught by one of her guards, and then everything descended into chaos. From hidden positions throughout the rotunda, figures emerged, dressed in dark tactical gear and carrying weapons that looked disturbingly advanced. They moved with military precision, targeting the security forces with ruthless efficiency. The sounds of combat filled the grand space, energy weapons crackling and people screaming. "Move! Move!" Commander Reeves shouted, physically pushing Maya toward the exit. But more attackers appeared, cutting off their route. The guards surrounding Maya formed up, weapons raised, preparing to fight their way through. Maya had been trained for situations like this, endless drills and scenarios designed to prepare her for every possible threat. But the reality was far more terrifying than any simulation. People were dying around her, guards and attackers and innocent guests caught in the crossfire. She saw a Vorian dignitary fall, their crystalline body shattering from a blast, and felt bile rise in her throat. The guards fought bravely, but they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. 2 went down in quick succession, and suddenly the protective circle around Maya was looking dangerously thin. Commander Reeves grabbed her arm, steering her toward what looked like a service entrance. "Through here," the commander said, and they plunged into a narrow corridor, leaving the battle behind. 3 guards came with them, their weapons trained on every shadow. They ran through a maze of passages, the sounds of combat gradually fading behind them. Maya's formal gown was completely impractical for running, and she hitched up the skirt, her expensive shoes clicking against the floor. Her mind was numb with shock and fear, unable to fully process what was happening. Then they rounded a corner and came face to face with more attackers. 5 of them, weapons raised, blocking the corridor. Commander Reeves shoved Maya behind her and opened fire, and the corridor erupted in chaos once more. Ethan was hopelessly lost. The maintenance tunnels all looked the same in the emergency lighting, and his datapad's navigation kept glitching from what he assumed was jamming or damage to the station's systems. He could hear combat all around him, though the sounds echoed strangely through the metal passages, making it impossible to determine direction. He was considering just finding a place to hide when he heard voices ahead. He froze, pressing himself against the wall, trying to determine if they were security or attackers. Then he heard a voice he recognized, sharp with authority and strain. "Fall back! Fall back!" Commander Reeves was shouting. Ethan peered around the corner and saw them, a small group of guards surrounding a familiar figure in a torn and dirty formal gown. Maya looked terrified but unharmed, and Ethan felt relief wash over him despite everything. But the situation was clearly desperate. The guards were retreating from superior numbers, and even from his limited vantage point, Ethan could see they were running out of corridor to retreat into. In moments, they would be trapped. Ethan's mind raced. He knew these passages, knew every maintenance shaft and hidden access panel. There was a way out, a route the attackers probably didn't know about, but it meant exposing himself, making himself a target. For about 3 seconds, he wrestled with the decision. Then he stepped out into the corridor. "This way," he shouted, waving his arms. "Follow me." Commander Reeves spun, weapon raised, then registered his maintenance uniform and the urgency in his voice. She made a split-second decision. "Move," she ordered her team, and they ran toward Ethan. Ethan led them to a maintenance panel set into the wall, one he had used dozens of times to access the environmental control systems. He popped it open, revealing a narrow crawlway beyond. "It's tight, but it leads to the outer ring," he said. "You'll be able to reach the emergency evacuation pods from there." "You first," Commander Reeves ordered, covering the corridor behind them. "Move." The guards started climbing through, and then Maya was there, meeting Ethan's eyes for the first time since he had discovered her identity. Her expression was a complicated mix of emotions, shock, fear, and something that might have been recognition or gratitude. "Ethan," she said, and there was a wealth of feeling in that single word. "Go," he said, gesturing to the crawlway. "No time." She hesitated, then climbed through. Ethan followed, with Commander Reeves coming last, sealing the panel behind them. The crawlway was barely wide enough for one person, and they had to move single file through the cramped space. Behind them, Ethan could hear the attackers discovering their escape route, but the panel would slow them down. "Where does this lead?" Commander Reeves demanded. "Service Junction 7. Then we can access the main evacuation routes," Ethan said, trying to remember the exact layout. "Stay low, there's a drop-off about 10 meters ahead." They moved as quickly as the confined space allowed, the sounds of pursuit gradually fading. Ethan's knowledge of the station's infrastructure proved invaluable, guiding them through a route that avoided the main corridors where the fighting seemed concentrated. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, they emerged into a larger service corridor. Commander Reeves immediately established a defensive position, her remaining guards covering both directions. "Princess, are you hurt?" she asked, turning to Maya. "I'm fine," Maya said, though she was visibly shaken. "What's happening out there?" "Unknown, but clearly a coordinated attack. We need to get you to a secure location and contact your father. The station's communications are jammed," one of the guards reported. "I can't reach anyone." "Then we move to evacuation pod 17. That's the closest secure location." Commander Reeves turned to Ethan. "You, maintenance worker, can you get us there from here?" Ethan nodded, still processing the surreal situation. "Yeah, I know the way. Follow me." As they moved through the corridors, Maya maneuvered closer to Ethan. "I can't believe you're here," she said quietly. "You came to help." "I heard the alarms," Ethan said, keeping his voice neutral. "Seemed like the right thing to do." "Ethan," Maya started, but he cut her off. "Not now. Focus on getting to safety." She fell silent, but he could feel her gaze on him. Despite everything, despite his anger and feelings of betrayal, he couldn't deny the relief he felt at seeing her safe. They could deal with everything else later, assuming they survived. They were approaching the junction that would lead to the evacuation pods when Ethan's instincts, honed by years of noticing small details in his work, screamed a warning. Something was wrong. The corridor ahead looked clear, but there was a scuff mark on the floor that didn't belong, and one of the ceiling panels was sitting slightly crooked. "Wait," he said, holding up a hand. "Stop." Commander Reeves froze. "What is it?" Ethan pointed to the ceiling panel. "That's been moved recently. Could be nothing, but in a station this well-maintained, it stands out." One of the guards carefully approached, scanning the area with a detection device. Her expression turned grim. "Explosives, sir. Looks like a proximity trigger." "Everyone back," Commander Reeves ordered. They retreated around the corner, and she turned to Ethan. "Alternative route." Ethan thought quickly, pulling up the mental map of the station he had built over 3 years. "There is one, but it's a longer path. Goes through the waste reclamation section. Anything's better than walking into a trap. Lead the way." The detour took them through some of the least glamorous parts of the station, areas where the reality of maintaining life support for thousands of beings became unavoidable. Maya's expensive gown collected smudges and stains, and she had long since abandoned her impractical shoes, moving barefoot on the cold metal floors. But she didn't complain, keeping pace with the group and staying alert. They were passing through a water treatment area when they heard voices ahead. Everyone flattened against the walls, weapons raised. Ethan recognized the language being spoken. It wasn't any he knew, which meant it probably wasn't friendly. Commander Reeves made a series of hand signals, and her guards prepared to engage. But Ethan had a different idea. The treatment area was full of controls and systems he understood intimately, having maintained them for years. He moved to a nearby panel and started entering commands. "What are you doing?" one of the guards hissed. "Giving us an advantage," Ethan whispered back. He triggered a purge sequence in one of the holding tanks, and moments later, a wall of recycled water surged through the corridor ahead with tremendous force. The voices turned to shouts of surprise and alarm, followed by the sounds of people being swept away by the current. "Now," Commander Reeves said, and they ran through the affected section. The attackers, 3 of them, were struggling to regain their feet, their weapons scattered by the flood. The guards subdued them quickly and efficiently. "Nice thinking," Commander Reeves said to Ethan, a note of grudging respect in her voice. They continued moving, now even more alert for potential ambushes. Ethan led them through increasingly obscure passages, using every bit of his knowledge to avoid main corridors and potential contact with hostile forces. Several times they heard combat in the distance, and once they had to hide in a storage closet while a group of attackers ran past, clearly searching for something. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the outer ring section that housed the emergency evacuation pods. This area was more heavily secured, and they were challenged by station security before being allowed through. Commander Reeves identified herself and Maya, and suddenly they were surrounded by friendly forces. "Your Highness," one of the security officers said, relief evident in his voice. "We've been trying to locate you. The Emperor has been informed you're safe." "What's the situation?" Commander Reeves asked. "The attack has been contained," the officer reported. "The hostiles took heavy casualties, and the survivors have been detained. We're still doing sweeps to ensure the station is secure, but the immediate threat is over." "Casualties?" Maya asked quietly. The officer's expression turned somber. "Significant, Your Highness. The final count is still being compiled, but we lost good people today." Maya closed her eyes briefly, grief and guilt warring across her face. Ethan watched her, seeing past the imperial princess to the young woman who clearly felt the weight of every life lost. Commander Reeves started making arrangements for Maya's secure transport to rejoin her father, and Ethan realized his role in this crisis was over. He started to quietly slip away, but Maya noticed immediately. "Wait," she said, turning to face him. "Please don't go. I should get back to my duties," Ethan said stiffly. "I'm sure there's cleanup work that needs doing." "Ethan," Maya took a step toward him, but he backed away. The guards around them had gone very still, clearly uncomfortable witnessing what was obviously a personal conflict involving the princess. "I'm glad you're safe, Your Highness," Ethan said, putting deliberate emphasis on the title. "But I think I've done my part. If you'll excuse me." He turned and walked away before she could respond, his heart hammering in his chest. Behind him, he heard Commander Reeves say something to Maya in a low voice, but he didn't look back. The next several hours were a blur of activity as the station worked to recover from the attack. Ethan joined the cleanup crews, throwing himself into the physical work to avoid thinking about everything that had happened. The official casualty reports came in gradually, each number a reminder of how close they had all come to disaster. 23 dead, including several high-ranking diplomats and 5 security officers. Dozens more injured. It could have been so much worse. The investigation moved quickly. The attackers were identified as members of an extremist faction opposed to the Galactic Council and humanity's growing influence. They had planned to assassinate several key figures, including the Emperor and his daughter, in a strike designed to destabilize the existing power structure. Their defeat was being hailed as a victory for security forces, though the loss of life cast a shadow over any celebration. Ethan tried to focus on work and ignore the constant news coverage, but it was impossible to escape. Every screen on the station seemed to be showing footage of the attack and its aftermath. He saw himself briefly in one clip, just a glimpse of a maintenance worker guiding a group through corridors, but most people wouldn't recognize him from the grainy security footage. What they did show prominently was Maya. Footage of her being escorted from the rotunda, disheveled but unharmed. Interviews with people praising her composure during the crisis. Commentary about how this would affect her standing as heir to the empire. It all felt surreal. Watching this person he thought he knew be discussed like a piece on a strategic game board. Luis found him in their quarters late that night, still in his work clothes, staring blankly at the wall. "Okay, talk to me," Luis said, sitting down on the opposite bunk. "I've gotten the basics from the rumor mill, but I want to hear it from you. That girl you've been seeing, the one you brought to the celebration, that was the princess?" Ethan nodded silently. "And you had no idea?" "None. She never told me." Luis hesitated, then asked gently, "So what are you going to do?" "Nothing," Ethan said. "What is there to do? She's the Emperor's daughter. I'm a janitor. She was probably just amusing herself, slumming with the common people for a thrill. Now she'll go back to her real life and forget I exist." "You don't really believe that," Luis said. "I don't know what to believe anymore." Before Luis could respond, Ethan's datapad chimed with an incoming message. He almost ignored it, but the sender field showed an official Imperial communication code. With growing dread, he opened the message. It was brief and formal, a summons to report to the Imperial suite at his earliest convenience to receive commendation for his actions during the attack. It was signed by Commander Reeves and countersigned by Princess Maya herself. "They want to give me a medal or something," Ethan said, showing the message to Luis. "Probably so they can feel like they adequately thanked the little person who helped out. Or maybe the princess wants to see you," Luis suggested. "You did save her life. I showed her a maintenance tunnel. The guards did the actual saving. You know what I mean. Come on, Ethan, at least hear her out. If nothing else, you deserve some actual closure instead of just avoiding the situation." Ethan wanted to refuse, to send back a polite decline and go back to his comfortable anonymity. But Luis was right. He did deserve answers. And maybe, a small voice in the back of his mind admitted, he wanted to see Maya one more time, even if it was just to say goodbye properly. "Fine," he said. "I'll go. But I'm not expecting anything except a formal thank you and a quick exit." The Imperial suite was located in the most secure section of the station, behind multiple checkpoints and security screenings. Ethan had to present his credentials at 3 different stations before he was finally escorted through a pair of ornate doors into an antechamber that was larger than his entire quarters. Commander Reeves was waiting for him, her expression neutral and professional. "Mr. Cole, thank you for coming. The princess wishes to speak with you privately." "That's not necessary," Ethan said. "I'm happy to receive whatever commendation you want to give me and be on my way." "I'm afraid the princess was quite insistent," Commander Reeves said, and there was the slightest hint of sympathy in her eyes. "If you'll follow me." She led him through another door into what appeared to be a private sitting room. The space was elegantly furnished, but somehow still felt impersonal, like a very upscale hotel room. Maya was standing by the window, wearing simple civilian clothes, her hair pulled back in the same practical ponytail she had worn when they first met. She turned when they entered, and Ethan saw hope and nervousness warring in her expression. "Thank you, Commander," Maya said. "That will be all." Commander Reeves gave Ethan one more unreadable look, then withdrew, closing the door behind her. Suddenly, Ethan and Maya were alone, the silence stretching between them heavy with unspoken words. "Thank you for coming," Maya said finally. "I wasn't sure you would." "I was summoned by Imperial order," Ethan said, more harshly than he intended. Didn't seem like refusing was an option. Maya flinched. "It wasn't meant to be an order. I asked Reeves to word it as an invitation, but I suppose formal protocols were followed regardless." "I'm sorry." "You're sorry," Ethan repeated. "For which part? For lying to me about who you were? For letting me make a fool of myself? For treating the last few weeks like some kind of game?" "It wasn't a game," Maya said, her voice rising slightly. "And I never lied to you. You never told me you were the Emperor's daughter," Ethan shot back. "That seems like a pretty significant omission." "Because I knew this would happen," Maya said, gesturing between them. "The moment you knew who I really was, everything would change. You'd stop seeing me as just Maya and start treating me like everyone else does, like a title instead of a person. So instead you let me walk around thinking we were equals, Ethan said. Let me invite you to a workers' celebration like that was something you would actually enjoy. Did you and your guards have a good laugh about the poor janitor who thought he had a chance with a princess? How dare you? Maya said, and now there were tears in her eyes. That night was one of the happiest I've had in years. Those people treated me like a normal person, and I got to dance with someone who saw me. Actually saw me, not my title or my future throne. Do you have any idea how rare that is? And you repaid my honesty with deception, Ethan said, but some of the anger was draining from his voice, replaced by a deep weariness. I told you things about myself, real things. I let myself care about you. And the whole time, you were keeping this massive secret. I wanted to tell you, Maya said. Every single day, I wanted to tell you the truth. But I was afraid of losing what we had. And I was right to be afraid, wasn't I? Because now you can barely look at me. The accusation stung because it was true. Ethan had been avoiding her eyes, focusing on the wall behind her or the floor. Now he forced himself to meet her gaze, and what he saw there made his chest ache. She looked genuinely hurt, vulnerable in a way he had never seen during all their conversations. What did you want to happen? He asked quietly. Did you think we could just keep pretending? That eventually I wouldn't find out who you really were? I don't know, Maya admitted. I wasn't thinking that far ahead. I was just trying to hold on to something good, something real, for as long as I could. Is that so wrong? It's not fair, Ethan said. Not to me, and frankly, not to you either. You can't just hide who you are and expect to build something genuine. I know, Maya said. You're right, and I'm sorry. I should have told you earlier. I should have trusted you with the truth. But Ethan, please believe me when I say that everything between us was real. My feelings were real. Ethan wanted to stay angry, wanted to hold on to his sense of betrayal like a shield. But looking at Maya now, seeing the sincerity in her eyes, he found his resolve crumbling. The truth was, he had known even during the worst of his hurt that Maya had cared about him. The way she had looked at him during the service workers' celebration, the vulnerability she had shown when talking about her life, those things couldn't be faked. I believe you, he said finally. I believe your feelings were real. But that doesn't change the fundamental problem. You're the emperor's daughter. You're going to inherit an empire. And I'm a maintenance worker with barely enough credits to make rent. There's no universe where this works. Why not? Maya challenged. Who says there's some law that dictates who I can care about? Come on, Maya. Be realistic. Your father probably has a list of suitable matches lined up, other royalty or high-ranking officials, or whatever. He's not going to approve of you dating a janitor. My father doesn't control every aspect of my life, Maya said. And before you argue, yes, I know there are expectations and political considerations, but I'm not some medieval princess being married off for an alliance. I get to have a say in my own future. And what future do you see? Ethan asked. One where I give up my life here and become what? Your secret boyfriend hidden away from the cameras? Or maybe you expect me to somehow transform into someone worthy of being seen with you publicly. I expect you to be yourself, Maya said firmly. That's all I've ever wanted. And as for the rest, we figure it out together. If you're willing to try. Ethan wanted to believe her. Despite everything, despite the rational voice in his head listing all the reasons this was impossible, he wanted to take that leap of faith. But the fear of getting hurt again, of investing himself in something doomed to fail, held him back. I don't know if I can do this, he said honestly. The trust is broken, Maya. How do we come back from that? The same way anyone does, Maya said. We rebuild it. One honest conversation at a time. No more secrets, no more hiding. I'll tell you everything about my life, and you tell me about yours, and we see if there's something worth fighting for. And if your father objects? If the imperial court decides I'm unsuitable? Then we deal with that when it happens, Maya said. But Ethan, I'm not asking you to make some grand romantic gesture or commit to forever right now. I'm just asking you to give us a chance. A real chance, with everything out in the open. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, weighing his options. The safe choice was to walk away now, to go back to his simple life and avoid the complexity and potential heartbreak that came with being involved with someone so far above his station. But when had he ever chosen safe over meaningful? One condition, he said finally. No more lies. If you're going to be gone for weeks on some diplomatic mission, you tell me. If there's some political complication that affects us, you tell me. Complete honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. Deal, Maya said immediately. And the same goes for you. If you're feeling overwhelmed or doubtful or anything else, you tell me. We talk through it instead of letting it fester. Okay, Ethan said. Then I guess we're doing this. The relief on Maya's face was palpable. Really? You mean it? On one more condition, Ethan added. You have to admit that Mrs. Chin's dumplings were the best thing you ate at that celebration. Maya laughed, the sound bright and genuine. They were incredible. I've been thinking about them for days. The tension that had filled the room began to dissipate, replaced by something that felt like cautious hope. They talked for another hour, Maya explaining the complexities of her position and the demands that would be placed on her in the coming months. Ethan shared more about his past, his family, and his dreams for the future. It was an easy conversation. There were moments of discomfort and difficult admissions, but it was honest in a way their previous talks hadn't been. Finally, as the station's artificial evening cycle began, Maya walked Ethan to the door. So what happens now? He asked. Now we take it one day at a time, Maya said. I have to stay here for another 2 weeks while my father finishes his negotiations. Can we see each other? Like normal people dating, as much as that's possible given the circumstances? I'd like that, Ethan said. Though I have to warn you, my idea of a date is probably very different from what you're used to. Good, Maya said with a smile. I could use different. They made plans to meet the following evening, somewhere quiet where they could talk without the pressures of their respective positions. As Ethan left the Imperial Suite and made his way back through the security checkpoints, he felt lighter than he had in days. This wasn't going to be easy, he knew that. There would be challenges and obstacles they couldn't even anticipate yet. But for the first time, he believed it might be possible. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of secret meetings and stolen moments. Maya's schedule was packed with official duties, debriefings about the attack, and continued negotiations on behalf of the Empire. But she carved out time whenever she could, meeting Ethan in quiet corners of the station where they could talk without being observed. They quickly established a pattern of complete honesty that was sometimes painful, but ultimately strengthening. Maya told him about the pressures of her position, the constant scrutiny, and the loneliness of never being sure if people liked her or her title. Ethan shared his insecurities about their different positions, his fear that he would never be good enough in the eyes of her family or society. What surprised them both was how much they had in common despite their different backgrounds. They both valued genuine connection over superficial relationships, both felt constrained by others' expectations, and both harbored dreams of making a meaningful difference in the galaxy. Their conversations ranged from philosophy to their favorite childhood memories, from galactic politics to the best places to watch the stars from the station. Ethan also got to see a side of Maya's work that he had never imagined. She showed him, in careful terms that didn't violate security protocols, some of the negotiations she was involved in. He was impressed by her skill at finding common ground between opposed parties, her ability to see multiple perspectives, and her genuine commitment to finding solutions that help people rather than just advancing political agendas. For her part, Maya gained a new appreciation for the technical complexity of keeping a station like Zenith 7 running. Ethan explained the interconnected systems that most people never thought about, the careful balance of environmental controls, power distribution, and life support that made civilization possible in the hostile environment of space. She began to understand that his work, though humble in status, was essential in ways that most political maneuvering could never be. They also had to navigate the practical realities of their situation. Commander Reeves, who had initially been skeptical about Ethan, gradually warmed to him after seeing how happy he made Maya. The commander quietly facilitated their meetings, ensuring Maya could slip away when possible without compromising her security. In return, Ethan proved his trustworthiness by maintaining complete discretion about his relationship with the princess. Not everyone was so accepting. Luis, while supportive of Ethan, worried about his friend getting in over his head. You know this can't last once she leaves the station, he said one evening. She's going back to the capital, back to her real life. What then? I don't know, Ethan admitted. But I'd rather have these 2 weeks with her than spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been. The attack on the Gala had lasting repercussions that affected everyone on the station. Security was dramatically increased, new protocols were implemented, and there was a general sense of unease that took time to fade. But it also brought changes that unexpectedly benefited Ethan. In the aftermath of the crisis, station management conducted a comprehensive review of their emergency response procedures. Ethan's actions during the attack, guiding the princess and her guards to safety using his knowledge of the station's infrastructure, caught the attention of the station director. He was called in for a meeting that he assumed would be a formal commendation. Instead, the director offered him a position in the station's emergency response team, a role that would include better pay, more responsibility, and training in crisis management. "It's clear you have skills and knowledge that are being wasted in basic maintenance," the director said. "We'd like to utilize your talents more effectively." Ethan accepted immediately, seeing it as a step toward the future he had once dreamed of. When he told Maya, she was genuinely thrilled for him, celebrating the recognition of abilities she had always seen in him. But the reality of their approaching separation loomed large. As Maya's time on the station drew to a close, they both felt the weight of uncertainty. Their last evening together before her scheduled departure, they met at the same observation lounge where they had first connected, the place that had started everything. "I don't want this to end," Maya said, standing close to him as they looked out at the stars. "These weeks have been the happiest I've had in years." "It doesn't have to end," Ethan said, though he felt the same fear. "We can stay in touch, messages and video calls." "It won't be the same," Maya said. "And there's so much uncertainty. My father wants me to take on more responsibilities, which means less freedom to make my own choices. And you're building a new career here. Our lives are going in different directions." "Unless they're not," Ethan said slowly, an idea forming. "What if I requested a transfer? There are stations near the capital, or even on Novaterra itself. My new position gives me more flexibility to apply for advanced opportunities." Maya turned to look at him, hope and concern warring in her expression. "You do that? Leave Zenith 7? There's nothing keeping me here except a job, and jobs exist everywhere. But you're the first person in years who's made me feel like I matter. That's worth pursuing." "But I can't ask you to uproot your entire life for me," Maya protested. "What if it doesn't work out? What if my father objects or the political situation makes it impossible?" "Then at least we tried," Ethan said. "And honestly, I've been stuck on this station for 3 years, doing work that doesn't challenge me, living a life that doesn't excite me. Maybe it's time for a change anyway. You just gave me a reason to be brave about it." Maya was quiet for a moment, then stood on her toes and kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise. "Okay," she said when they parted. "Let's try. But we do this smart. You apply for positions that make sense for your career, not just ones close to me. Build your own life, and we figure out how to make ours fit together." "Deal," Ethan said. The next morning, Maya departed Zenith 7 aboard an Imperial transport, surrounded by her retinue and security detail. Ethan watched from a public observation area as the ship pulled away from the station and engaged its faster-than-light drive, vanishing in a flash of light. He felt the familiar ache of separation, but also a sense of determination. This wasn't an ending, just a new phase. Over the following months, they maintained constant communication despite the challenges of their different schedules and the lightspeed lag in messages. Maya sent him long messages about her work, the political challenges she faced, and her ongoing efforts to carve out a role for herself that felt meaningful rather than merely ceremonial. Ethan shared his experiences with the emergency response team, the new skills he was learning, and his applications to various advanced positions across the Empire. What he didn't tell her immediately was that he had also enrolled in remote engineering courses, using his free time to work toward the degree he had abandoned years ago. He wanted to prove, to himself as much as anyone else, that he could be more than circumstances had forced him to be. 6 months after Maya left Zenith 7, Ethan received 2 significant pieces of news. First, he had been accepted into a prestigious emergency management program on Novaterra itself, a 2-year position that would give him advanced training and certification in crisis response and infrastructure security. Second, Maya had convinced her father to meet him. The message from Maya was excited and nervous in equal measure. "He wants to meet you officially. He knows we've been staying in contact, and I finally told him how serious this is for me. He's willing to have dinner with us next week when you arrive on Novaterra." She had added, "No pressure or anything, but this is kind of a big deal. Ethan stared at the message for a long time, his heart pounding. Meeting the Emperor, the most powerful human in the galaxy, as the man dating his daughter, was terrifying on multiple levels. But it was also an opportunity, a chance to prove that he was worthy of Maya's affection despite his humble background. He sent back a simple response. I'll be there. Try to keep him from having me executed before the appetizers. Maya's reply came quickly. I make no promises, but I'll do my best. I can't wait to see you. The trip to Novatera took 3 days aboard a commercial transport, giving Ethan plenty of time to be nervous. He used the journey to review everything he could find about Imperial protocol, proper forms of address, and the Emperor's known preferences and personality. Marcus Aldred was described as pragmatic and fair, but also protective of his daughter and intolerant of those he perceived as opportunistic or insincere. Novatera itself was breathtaking, a world that had been terraformed to near perfection over the past century. The capital city of Astralis sprawled across a temperate valley, its architecture a blend of classical Earth styles and cutting-edge modern design. The Imperial Palace sat on a hill overlooking the city, a structure that managed to be both imposing and beautiful. Maya met him at the spaceport, and the reunion was everything Ethan had hoped for. She looked radiant in casual civilian clothes, her face lighting up when she saw him. They embraced, and for a moment, all of Ethan's nervousness faded. This was why he had come, why he was willing to face any challenge. Because being with her felt right in a way nothing else ever had. I've missed you so much, Maya said, pulling back to look at him. Messages aren't the same as being in person. I know, Ethan agreed. But we're here now. She took his hand, and they walked to a waiting vehicle, a modest transport rather than anything ostentatious. As they drove toward the palace, Maya filled him in on the dinner plans and her father's current mood. He's actually looking forward to meeting you, she said. I've told him about how you helped during the attack, about your new position, about everything. He's intrigued by someone who doesn't want anything from him except to care about his daughter. No pressure, though, Ethan said dryly. The palace was even more impressive up close, but Maya led him through side entrances and private corridors rather than the grand public spaces. They ended up in a surprisingly intimate dining room, nothing like the formal state chambers Ethan had imagined. The table was set for 3, and a man was already there, reviewing something on a datapad. Emperor Marcus Aldred looked up as they entered, and Ethan's first thought was that Maya had inherited her striking eyes from him. The Emperor was in his 50s, his hair graying at the temples, but his bearing still military straight. He wore simple, elegant civilian clothes rather than any ceremonial robes, and his expression as he studied Ethan was neutral and assessing. Father, Maya said, her voice carrying both affection and a hint of nervousness. This is Ethan Cole. Your Majesty, Ethan said, executing what he hoped was an appropriate bow. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. Mr. Cole, the Emperor said, rising and extending his hand. Maya has told me a great deal about you. Please sit. This is meant to be a casual dinner, not a formal audience. They sat, and servants began bringing in courses of food. For the first few minutes, the conversation was carefully neutral, touching on Ethan's journey to Novatera and his impressions of the capital. But Ethan could feel the Emperor's attention on him, assessing and measuring. Finally, Marcus set down his fork and looked directly at Ethan. Let me be direct, Mr. Cole. My daughter is precious to me, and her happiness matters more than political convenience or social expectations. She believes you're someone worth knowing. Convince me she's right. Ethan met his gaze steadily. Your Majesty, I won't pretend I come from privilege or that I have connections that benefit the Empire. What I can offer Maya is honesty, respect, and genuine care for who she is rather than what she represents. I've seen her at her most vulnerable and most courageous. I know the weight she carries, and I want to be someone who helps shoulder that burden rather than adds to it. Marcus studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Maya told me you guided her to safety during the attack on Zenith 7, using knowledge most people would overlook. That shows character and quick thinking under pressure. The Empire needs more people like that. He paused, then smiled slightly. She also told me you made her laugh at a workers' celebration. That might be even more valuable. The dinner continued with gradually warming conversation. Marcus shared stories about Maya's childhood, and Maya teased her father about his own romantic history. By the end of the evening, Ethan felt like he had passed some crucial test, not through pretense, but through being genuinely himself. Over the next 2 years, as Ethan completed his training program and Maya took on increasing responsibilities within the Imperial government, their relationship deepened and solidified. They faced challenges, long separations when duty called them to different parts of the galaxy, public scrutiny when their relationship became known, and the constant pressure of their different positions. But they navigated each obstacle together, building something real and lasting. Eventually, when Ethan accepted a position as Director of Emergency Infrastructure for the Imperial Core Worlds, a role that utilized both his technical expertise and crisis management skills, Maya stood beside him at the announcement ceremony. The former janitor from Zenith 7 had become someone important in his own right, not because of who he loved, but because of his own abilities and dedication. And when Marcus Aldred formally blessed their engagement 2 years later, it wasn't a political arrangement or a compromise. It was a father recognizing that his daughter had found someone who valued her for herself, someone whose humble beginnings had taught him to see people's true worth rather than their titles. The wedding was held in the palace gardens, a blend of state ceremony and genuine celebration. As Ethan and Maya exchanged vows under the stars, surrounded by friends from every level of society, from emperors to maintenance workers, he thought back to that first night in the observation lounge. He had been a lonely janitor pushing a cart, and she had been a princess hiding from her burdens. Neither had known then how their lives would change, how a simple conversation would lead to this moment. But looking at Maya now, radiant and happy and completely herself, Ethan knew that every challenge had been worth it. They had built something genuine in a world of pretense, found real connection across impossible divides, and proven that sometimes the most unlikely beginnings lead to the most extraordinary endings. Their story became legend on Zenith 7 and beyond, a reminder that humans, with their peculiar habit of seeing potential rather than limits, could bridge any gap when they chose to be brave, honest, and true to themselves. It was the most human thing of all, to take a chance on connection despite every reason not to, and to build something beautiful from the most unexpected encounters. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments. Whether positive or negative, your feedback helps us improve. Also leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.